So let's take a look at this easy situational judgment test question focusing on ethics and professionalism. So the question says, Layla is a final year medical student on placement in a busy A&E department. One afternoon, she notices that a junior doctor is repeatedly making belittling remarks to a nurse in front of other staff. The nurse looks visibly uncomfortable. Layla isn't sure whether to say something immediately or report it later. How appropriate is it for Layla to do the following? Now, in these situational judgment test questions, these appropriateness ones, you have 4 different categories: very appropriate, appropriate but not ideal, inappropriate but not awful, and a very inappropriate thing to do. An important thing to remember is that there won't necessarily be one for each of the categories. They might all fit in one category. There might be no category that is relevant to the 4 options either. So don't try and kind of think, oh, I haven't done something that's very inappropriate, so that's going to be option D, perhaps. Let's have a look at the potential responses that Layla could have to this situation. A, raise the issue with her supervising consultant at the end of the shift. Now, raising the issue with her supervising consultant, this would be a very appropriate way to manage this situation. The supervising consultant, there is a kind of level of seniority there, where the supervising consultant would then be able to kind of speak with the junior doctor, and the staff and the patient care is not going to be compromised. So A would perhaps be very appropriate. B says, speak to the doctor in front of the team and ask them to stop. Now, this is challenging the behavior, challenging the unethical and unprofessional behavior from the junior doctor, but this is challenging it in an open setting that could potentially lead to an escalation. It could cause the junior doctor to kind of retaliate perhaps a little bit more. It would be much better to handle this situation in private or via the appropriate channels, such as speaking to the supervisor. So this would be appropriate, but not ideal. C would be to say nothing, as it's not her place to intervene. Now, this would be very inappropriate. By saying nothing, we are being a bystander to this unprofessional behavior, and therefore we are kind of potentially condoning it. As doctors or as anyone in the medical profession, we need to uphold those ethical standards and team well-being as well. And then, so this would be very inappropriate. And then D, asking the nurse if they are okay and offering support. Now, this is appropriate. This is definitely good to kind of check in with the nurse, check that they are okay. And we can perhaps in that conversation check whether what action they would like us to take as well, and say to them, I would like to report this to the supervising consultant too. So again, this would be appropriate, but perhaps not ideal because it doesn't challenge the behavior of the junior doctor. So appropriate, perhaps not ideal. Let's take a look at this medium difficulty situational judgment test question based on ethics and professionalism. So the scenario is Sarah, a first-year medical student, finds a past paper with detailed model answers in a shared Google Drive labeled Year 1 Practice. She later learns it was meant only for the staff exam board. She's unsure whether to report it. How important are the following factors in deciding what to do? So this is the other type of question that you would receive in the SJT section, where we have some potential considerations or factors to mull over in response to a scenario. And we have to decide whether they are very important, important, minor importance, or not important at all. And we're really going to think about this in how does it relate to our kind of ethical code of practice, our professional code of practice as well when it comes to being a doctor. So our first one, using the paper could give some students an unfair advantage. This is very important. The reason it's very important is because equity in assessment is really, really critical. It is important that it is a fair test, that nobody has an advantage over anybody else. She's not supposed to have access to this paper, and not notifying the staff, this could kind of cause concern. This could have problems later down the line, and it removes that equity part of the assessment process. B, she didn't upload it herself, so it's not her problem. This, not important at all. Everybody has a role to play in maintaining these ethical and professional standards and fairness in assessment. Even though it's not Sarah's mistake, it is still Sarah's responsibility to report that mistake. C, the file may have been posted by mistake. Now, this is important. Not necessarily the most important thing. It doesn't matter whether it's a mistake or whether it's intentional, but the correct people need to be informed so that they can kind of take corrective action as well. And then D, reporting it might affect her reputation with peers. This is of minor importance. Parts like this come up quite often in the SJT, where it's about how does it affect the way that your friends, your peers, your flatmates, your course mates, whatever it may be, their kind of opinion of you or how you kind of fit in within that group. Now, our ethical duty, our professional standards outweigh our fear of peer backlash, of kind of our friends not liking the path or the decision that we have made. Let's take a look at this hard question from the situational judgment test relating to ethics and professionalism. Let's take a look at our scenario first. Nikhil is on a surgical placement. During a ward round, the consultant discusses a patient's diagnosis aloud in a crowded lift. Other members of the public are present and Nikhil feels uneasy about the breach of confidentiality. This is one of our most appropriate, least appropriate style questions. So we need to choose both the one most appropriate and one least appropriate action that Nikhil should take in response to this situation. The third option is a null option. It is neither the worst nor the best. It is perhaps a relevant action that could be taken, but it's not the best action and it's not the worst action. It's kind of in the middle. So, A, wait until the ward round ends and raise his concern with the consultant privately. For these style of questions, I think it's important to read all three options before you start considering which is the most appropriate and which is the least. B, say nothing. It's the consultant's responsibility, not his. C, ask a senior nurse if this sort of behaviour is normal. Well, the most appropriate response is going to be A, to speak to the consultant privately. This is going to respect the seniority of the consultant, and it's also going to mean that the concern has been raised in a polite way that is not going to damage that professional relationship between Nikhil and the senior consultant. B, saying nothing is absolutely the least appropriate action. It is everyone's responsibility to uphold those professional standards. So to say nothing is to be a bystander and potentially condone and say that those things are okay. C, asking a senior nurse if this sort of behaviour is normal. This is our null option. We're not necessarily kind of addressing the concern or resolving it. We might get some more insight, but it's still going unchallenged.